In this lesson, we'll learn about using 0 as a placeholder when we are working with decimal numbers. So, we know how to read these diagrams already. So we're going to write the decimal number for each picture in two ways. First, without using 0, then using 0. So here I have two whole units that are shaded. And so that will be represented as 2 units or 2 ones. And there's a decimal point here. But we didn't include any tenths. The second time we write it, we're going to include the tenths place. We have 2 ones and 0 tenths. That makes sense because if we think about this as a fraction, it takes 10 tenths to make 1 whole, and it would take 20 tenths to make 2 wholes. So when we use decimal numbers, we're really saying 2 units. And when we write it this way, we're saying 20 tenths. And we know that with flexible place value, those two names represent the same amount. And so here I have 1, 2, 3, 4 whole units. And I also have 30 tenths, or 3 whole units and 0 tenths. And so your turn. Oops, I forgot my decimal point. Loud and proud, happy to exist as a decimal point. Decimal point, loud and proud, happy to exist as a decimal point. Okay. Now you can do those last two examples, those last two exercises. So, when you use a 0 to fill an empty space in a number, you are using 0 as a placeholder. The 0 fills a place in the number, but adds no value. So whether we think of this as 3 whole units, 3 and no tenths, or 30 tenths, whether we acknowledge the 0 in the tenths place or not, the value is not changed. And so including that 0 at the end, including that 0 on the right, does not add any value to the number. So I'm going to rewrite each number below using 0 as a placeholder. So here I have 7, which is the same as 7 and 0 tenths, or 70 tenths. Here I have 4, and so I'm going to have 4 and 0 tenths, or 40 tenths. Here I have 6, which is the same thing as 6 and 0 tenths, or 60 tenths. I have 13, or 13 and 0 tenths, or 130 tenths. So I want you to do these next 4 by yourself. We have 8 tenths. Notice this one is already tenths, and so this is 0 and 8 tenths, or just 8 tenths. Here we have 3 tenths, which is the same thing as 0 and 3 tenths. Then we have 1 tenth, and this is the same thing as 0 and 1 tenth, or just 1 tenth. And then we have 7 tenths, which is the same thing as 0 and 7 tenths. So rewrite each number without using 0 as a placeholder. So we have 5 and 0 tenths, which is the same as just 5. 50 tenths is the same as just plain old 5. 1 and 0 tenths, which is the same as, you say it out loud, 1 and 0 tenths, which is the same as, yes, 1, or 10 tenths. 8 and 0 tenths, which is the same as, say it out loud, yes, 8 or 80 tenths. So go ahead and do the rest of those, and then do the matching. You might need to use your handy dandy math stick to make your lines neat. You might need to use your handy dandy math stick to make your lines neat. Hint, hint, hintity, hint.